I would say action wins. I think the main thing I always tell to the team is like, I like things 80% perfect and then we move on it, right? If you always wait till 100%, you don't get a lot of stuff done. And I think a lot of things, TikTok shops, even the early days of Amazon, right? There's really first movers that are doing very well. So I think, take advice from your peers and partners. I just double down on the things that are working. As soon as you see a green light, make sure you hit the gas because that's where all the gains are made.
Hello and welcome everyone again to another session of Intentwise Connect podcast where we bring industry practitioners. We want to learn from them firsthand. And I couldn't be more excited to be hosting Jay Hunter, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at MaryRuth Organics. Jay, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Excellent. I've been prepping for this chat for a little bit. It's not very common for me to have the opportunity to talk to someone who's overseeing this rocket ship of a brand, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, excited to just dig into how you think about growth. But before we do that, share with us just your personal story leading up to where you currently are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've been with the MaryRuth company for quite some time now, about 5 years full time and about 2 years consulting. I really cut my teeth in the industry in the world of Amazon. I used to have sort of a third party Amazon advertising consulting agency, and that's sort of how I fell into the MaryRuth brand. But I started as just our Amazon director, sort of helping build up the Amazon channel, which has always been our largest channel. Even today, it still is. And I've just grown my responsibilities from there. So today I'm Chief Revenue Officer. I really oversee all the D2C sales, pretty much everything that's not brick and mortar retail in the US, and then all of the marketing and analytics functions. So really just trying to drive the engine on awareness and brand building.
Beautiful. MaryRuth as a brand, started several years back. It started, I think, as a single product brand, but it has evolved quite a bit since, right?
Yes. Yep.
Just give us a little bit of color on product mix evolution, product category evolution, and then I've got some follow-on questions on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we did start with one product, sort of our hero SKU, which is our morning multivitamin, because it's like a raspberry flavor. That's MaryRuth's like core initial product that she believed in. Today we have over 220 SKUs, quite a few. It spans a lot of formats. So, we're well known for our liquid products, but we also sell gummies. We have capsule products. There's sort of a unique liquid format called liposomal. And then those products really span like a lot of functions, a lot of life stages. So, we've got multivitamins for the whole family. We've got some for women. We've got kids, infant, toddler products. Sort of our newest, fastest growing segment or product line is our Beauty from Within line. That's doing very well and is now carries a lot of our core hero SKUs.
It is a crowded category, right, Jay? Like just from a supplement brand perspective. Clearly, you all stand out in multiple ways, but I want to get your perspective on how do you think about differentiation? How do you think about like staying above the clutter and the noise that can come from competition? Just thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that I learned, especially as like our retail presence has grown, but it is a crowded category, and I think for a lot of consumers, it's a little bit of a scary category, right? Like, what products should you take? Which products should you trust? I think that's a little bit difficult for customers to navigate. So for us, I really think about trust as sort of like currency, right? Education and compliance are like the foundation of making sure consumers trust you, and you want to make sure that you're doing those things right. Like you want to, and I think this is really like MaryRuth's sort of thought process and foundation, but like she sells products that she gives to her family as well, right? So you want to give your family, the most efficacious or compliant or like safe products, and I think that's where we always sort of lead with in our product development cycle. And I think the space is crowded for VMS, but I do think like there's still white space in format or flavor or formulation. What ingredients you're using. There's always new ingredients. Always new clinical studies. So I think there's still space to differentiate. For us, we really differentiate on format. I think it's big for us, making the products taste great. We're really trying to create an experience for consumers around taking their vitamin routine.
Does the product expansion aspect of it, how does it work within the org? Is it revenue strategy led? Is it, you're just so close to the consumers that you're figuring out, newer needs? Is that what drives it? Is it a combination of both? Because that is such a critical part of that growth engine. And I'm just curious, how does it work at MaryRuth?
Yeah, I think there's a certain size that you get as a company, and many functions or jobs can't really be owned by one person or even one department, right? So I think product innovation is like one of those pillars. We have a great product development and innovation team they do all the hard work. It's just like how to get the formulation right, how to make it taste great. But I think for like the strategic innovation on deciding like what the company's going to make, we have like an entire executive strategic innovation committee for that, right? And that's really led by all the functions, right? There's what are the brand platforms or sort of product lines that we believe in as a company, right? And does the innovation fit into those lines? There's a component of sales, for myself, and then for my retail head, Matt Buckley, like, do we think we can sell this item in our channels, and does it fit with the assortment that we have today? There's a little bit of a marketing component, right? Do we think we can build excitement and awareness around the product? And then there's a little bit about, can we make it efficacious? Can we make it taste great? Right. So there's a lot of components. I think this is the type of function or job that not one department or person can own. So for us, it's like a very much a collaborative process. And I think that's the only way you can really do it right, especially when you get bigger. I think we've tried it other ways in the past, and sometimes we made some products that are not that great or don't fit for every channel or with the core strategy. You end up with excess inventory, which is just tough, right? You want to be making great products that you can sell, and also are not a burden to your cash flow. So
Totally. That's a good segue into the channel conversation I want to have. And I've been learning a lot from your own posts on social. Like lately, you've been talking a lot about TikTok Shop, right? And
yeah,
the importance of presence on TikTok Shop. And correct me if I'm wrong, you have a 24-hour live stream running at this point. Are you
that's
already
correct.
there?
Yeah,
You,
yeah,
you were at
yeah. We're
21, you're trying to get to 24, right?
as of this month, we were live 24 hours a day on TikTok shops. Yeah,
That's
I
all.
think for us,
Yeah,
every channel is important, and I think they serve either a different function or a complementary function. I think for us, we're really always thinking about, like, for scale, that's really Amazon or retail, right? Those are the channels that have huge volume, especially on retail and FDM, but even in the natural channels, right? Our number one retailer today is Whole Foods. And
yeah,
we love them. They're a great partner to us, one of our innovation partners. But we're really thinking for retail and Amazon, we're thinking scale. For
sure.
Shopify, we're really thinking loyalty, right? We want to give the consumer the best experience. We want to educate them on the product, right? So we want to take care of the customer on Shopify. And then for TikTok shops, I think it's a new and up and coming channel. But for us, we really think about it like awareness, right? It's one of the few sales channels that's also a marketing channel, right? It's very rare you get this combination. And so I think TikTok shops is, for us, the fastest growing channel, but also the most exciting in terms of just building awareness for those other channels. So I
Sure.
think it's very complementary, and you need them all. Very excited about TikTok shops, but our retail channels are also growing. And I think once you get some traction in retail, as long as you're driving velocities, which I do think our marketing engine is helping with, it's really a huge channel. I think most sales for our category, especially, are still done at the retail
Yeah.
store.
I want to dig deeper into the TikTok channel a bit more, right? Over the last 6 months, I think one of the common themes I've heard from most brands I talk to is they are thinking and investing into TikTok. From what you have seen, tell me what majority is doing right or wrong. How should a brand e-commerce manager be thinking about TikTok shop that they potentially are not today, based on your observation?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have a lot of different advice on this, right? And I think I've said this recently too, but thousand roads lead to Rome, right? I think for us, I'm running the TikTok shop channel pretty profitably, right? And I generally don't advise you that you don't.
Yeah.
But I do think it's an awareness engine, right? So I do think you can afford to have a bit less margin than you might on your other channels, because it should be driving pretty strong velocities to those other channels. I think the main thing that most brands should be cautious of, or just think about as they're building a strategy, is like most of the marketing expense, I would say, is in working with the creators and getting them product samples, right? Or product seeding, less on your traditional, TikTok ad spend, right? So I think most of the upfront investment, especially if you're a new brand, is you've got to give away a substantial amount of free product so that you can seed that product to creators and they can make videos, right? TikTok has the algorithm has a very short attention span, the same as the customers consuming the content. And so you need a very strong engine of incoming new content to keep it fresh, right? I do think it differs heavily from like a Meta, where you can spend $1 million on your greatest ad, and then TikTok, the content just gets so stale that you really can't run ad spend like that, right? You need a lot of new content coming in and being fresh, right? It's in TikTok's best interest to always serve fresh and good content. So I think for a lot of brands, the part they miss is like, you really got to invest up front on making sure you have that content flywheel, and then you can invest a little bit on ads to sort of supercharge the flywheel. And that's usually my recommendation.
Great point. You mentioned awareness should be potentially the primary goal with TikTok, and you're seeing benefits show up on your other channels. I want to spend a little bit of time on measurement later on, but I'm curious, how are you measuring impact of TikTok on these other channels? Are you looking just at correlations? Like, just walk me through how you're connecting the dots.
Yeah, I mean, this one, I'm very big on data. We'll talk about this a little bit, right? I'm piping in every data source under the sun. Some of that, partnered with you from Intentwise. But I think this is the part that I think there is a bit of art, right? Like I do think it's a mix, especially in today's like marketing world. It's like quite a bit of science and data, but there's a good chunk of art, I would say, right? So for me, my number one sort of live or die rule is I wake up in the morning, and yesterday, if our TROMs, our total return on marketing spend, that's what I spend on TikTok shops or Meta or anywhere, is good relative to our gross sales, I will spend more today, right? If it's not, I'll spend less, right? And so I sort of live and die by like this hard and fast rule where like it is art. Maybe some of the spend was wasted. Maybe some of it could be further optimized, and we'll dive into that. But like as a general rule, I think if I'm spending more on TikTok shops and sales are growing on TikTok shops and I see that velocity spill into the other channels, right, usually I'm feeling pretty good. We measure that a bunch of different ways. Like I have every MMN tool under the sun, right? I'm using Northbeam or Triple Whale or Measured. We also have some of our own internal tools. A lot of people tell me that's overkill, but for us, I'd like to see the data 4 different ways and try to make sort of that art assessment versus not having it at all. So
I heard an acronym. I want to make sure I got it right. TROMs.
TROMs, yeah. So a lot of people
Total
do,
return on marketing spend.
yeah, right. Because a lot of people do TROAS, right, which would be like return on ad spend. But I think these days, like marketing is so much more than that, right? Like for me, total return on marketing spend is my Meta spend, my TikTok spend, but then also what did I spend on influencers? What did I spend on content that I had to make to run some of those ads, right? So I have a little bit more holistic view, I would say, right? Like everything it took us to run our marketing engine, which is so heavy content these days versus necessarily all just ad dollars. And so, yeah, TROMs is my favorite metric to live or die by.
I
So
love that. And it's a lot of different components going into marketing spend, which also shines the light on importance of a robust data strategy. Otherwise, you cannot get there. But I'll get
for
to that
sure.
again in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I want to unpack the channel piece a bit more as a growth lever, right? So you mentioned Amazon, you mentioned retail. Sounds like Shopify is your D2C
Yep.
platform. Can you share with me how do you think about D2C site versus Amazon in terms of both the importance of a channel from both awareness as well as conversion standpoint? Like, are you running tactics where one can drive efficiency on the other? Sounds like D2C is still smaller than, let's say, your Amazon channel still. Like, and is that by design? Do you see it staying that way? Like, walk me through how you connect D2C on a channel like and a channel like Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very big. I think our marketing philosophy is always I want customers to shop where they want to shop. So, and I think today, like a lot of our marketing is very omni-channel, right? I consider Meta and TikTok sort of the new television, right? Where sure, I can send some of the Meta ads directly somewhere, like to our D2C site or to Shopify. But a lot of times people watch the content and then they went and took their action. So if they want to shop on my D2C site, amazing. That's great. I want to give them the best experience possible. But if they like to shop at Amazon or they want to pick up the product when they get their groceries at the retail store, I want them to do that, right? So a lot of our messaging today is like very omni-channel, and I don't try to force the customer anywhere that they don't want to shop. So I sort of let the chips fall in that regard. I do think on Shopify, we're always A/B testing, trying to refine, trying to make the experience the best we can. Like this year, we're going through a big website redesign, which I think will be very impactful. We've overhauled our cart a little bit. We're rolling out bundles, right? We do a lot to make the Shopify experience better for the consumer. But some consumers just like to buy their vitamins on Amazon or, now on TikTok shops or at retailers. And I want them to get the same experience. I try to educate them as much as I can in the advertising so that they sort of have the same knowledge going in there when they want to purchase. And so, we try to keep it very omni-channel and let the consumer shop where they want to shop.
Is there a difference in product catalogs between D2C versus Amazon?
It's pretty similar, I would say. The only time it differentiates is I do think you need a little bit of a different strategy between like your maybe Amazon and Shopify and your retail natural versus like an FDM, right? Walmart and Target and maybe CVS, they carry like a smaller size count of the product, which I think happens a lot. And then in the opposite way, maybe a larger count or size for like your club channels, right? Like a Costco or a Sam's Club. But I think in general, besides size or like size of the product or pack size, like I want the same products on all the channels, right? I want to be able to run an ad and then, for my morning multivitamin raspberry, and a consumer can buy that product, maybe in a different size or count, but that same morning multivitamin raspberry on Amazon or Shopify or at Target or at Whole Foods or at Sam's Club, right? Like I want that one marketing dollar to stretch as far as possible for all of my channels. So I like the selection to be consistent. I think it's hard to get 220 SKUs into every retailer. I think like Whole Foods and Vitamin Shop are carrying 100 plus of our SKUs these days. So it is possible, but difficult. But for the hero SKUs, especially, like I want the same product to be in those channels so that I can really stretch the marketing dollars as far as possible. So
I want to make sure I got your channel mix right, right? So
yeah,
I've heard Amazon, D2C, of course, on the marketing side, you've got TikTok Shop. Can you just quickly do a rundown of your channel mix today? And also, I'm curious, where was it 2 years ago? And just talk to me about that evolution too.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So Amazon still our largest channel today. It's sort of where we grew up, right? I think Amazon's about 50%. The other 50% is pretty mixed and it's shifting like every day. So a little harder for me to quantify on this exact call. But I think retail is growing incredibly fast. I think it'll be at least 25% of revenue this year, and that's up from 2 years ago, maybe being 10% or less.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really growing quickly. I think, sort of the other 25% or so is Shopify, TikTok shops, maybe a little bit of international business and other marketplaces, right? So we do some of that, but I would say, Amazon retail are now sort of the big pillars. TikTok shops and Shopify combined are definitely doing well as also, but TikTok shop is just such a new channel, definitely the fastest growing one, right? Like in year 2, it'll do, high 8 figures, which I think is like incredibly good for the channel. But I think retail is the one that's just like exploding as we get more distribution, right? And it's sort of on year 3, 4, where it's like getting a lot more traction.
I assume you use Google and Meta to drive to your Shopify site primarily.
Primarily, yes, but I would say again, as retail expands, it gets a little bit more different, right? So like even for Google and like Google Shopping, right? A lot of that is like what's available in your closest local store, right? So now there's like a lot of our Google Shopping, I think, is actually driving velocities at retail. So today, it's not the most sophisticated in the world, but we try to allocate our Meta, our TikTok, not TikTok Shops, which is our core TikTok advertising or marketing, and our Google. We split the allocation of those channels and their costs based on the sales ratio of each channel, right? Because we do think it's sort of driving velocities at all those channels. There's probably a more scientific way to do it, but that's the most fair, I think, right? Because it's again, it's pretty omnichannel and it's sort of like the new TV, right? So it's lower funnel, but it's also upper funnel, right? It's doing both these days.
Perfect. I want to get into the shoes of brand managers a little bit, Jay, and kind of get a little bit tactical on how you manage your day in what is seemingly a fairly complex problem. You've got like, 150, 200 plus products. You've
Yep.
named all the channels, and I'm pretty sure you have some aggressive goals. And so you come into work, how do you manage your day? What are you looking at? Give us an idea of what your day to day looks like.
Yeah. So for me, I'm very blessed. I only need 4 hours of sleep a day. So generally, I'm online and using a lot more hours than maybe everyone else. So this certainly helps. But I think when I wake up in the morning, I have an amazing sort of Tableau dashboard world.
Sure.
In my part of the org, I have 3 analytics managers and essentially rocket scientist girls that are really great at putting all the data together and then putting in a visualization that really helps me understand like what's going on in the business. So in the morning, I wake up and I look at what was performance yesterday. That's by channel, right? What was Amazon sales or Shopify or even retail? What did we spend on marketing? What kind of discounts did we have? What discounts are driving the most velocity? What's the current trend of product mix? And like, is that any different in the last yesterday versus the last 7 or the last 90 days? I'm looking at AOVs and CAC and LTV, right? And I can see all that in just a couple clicks of dashboards, which I find incredibly helpful because it really helps me identify green flags or red flags, right? I'm really big on go where the green lights are. So anything that's really working, we're going to double down on. Anything that's not working, we're ideally going to cut back or try to reassess. So in the morning, it's very much like a what happened yesterday and do we need to make any pivots today? I have a really amazing team. So I would say the rest of the time, I tell the team, but like my entire job is mostly removing roadblocks, right? Like my directors are very good at leading their function, right? I have a director of e-commerce who does Amazon and TikTok shops. I have a director of Shopify, right? I have director of paid media or influencers. And like they're generally running the day-to-day strategies, but it's like, where do we see roadblocks or where are we trying to supercharge that they could use advice from me? And pretty much the rest of my day is spent just doing that, right? Like, if we can't get through to TikTok to fix a campaign or we're not sure what our strategy should be for upcoming Prime Day, like that's when I jump in and try to lend a hand. But for the most part, like the team is, incredibly capable, incredibly good. I think I'm usually trying to help them, grow and lead based on KPIs, right? What's the KPI for that department? Like if it's email and SMS, like what's our email click-through rate? What's our revenue percent, things like that. And then I'm trying to help the the directors or the leaders grow by giving them quarterly rocks, right? So like I have a creative director today who I think is going to make an amazing head of brand in the future. And like she's trying to help us define, what are our brand platforms that the company really believes in, right? We've done that exercise in the past, but is it still true today? Do we think it's going to be different in the future? And like, how could she help us define that? I've got like another sprint where someone in her same org is helping us build like an internal consumer group that can give us advice and feedback on like new product launches, or if our retail team has a question about like how would you respond to this retailer, a lot of things like that. That's like another sprint, right? And these sprints, they drive the business forward, and ideally they help these leaders build their resume, right, and help them grow as leaders. So for me, it's a little bit of a mix of all those things, but I think number one job at this level is roadblock remover or problem solver, right? So if there's one of those, ideally I'm coming in and I'm helping make it a little bit easier.
Jay, what you described as the analytics infrastructure you have in place, just based on my experience of doing what we do at Intentwise and working with a lot of brands, it's not common. And I've seen some of the visuals. Like every time we met, you showed me some things. It's pretty exciting to see. I'm glad we are partnered on this. But I think, I've spent a lot of time in the data and analytics realm for the last 20 years. Investing upfront to build out such capabilities a lot of times requires a vision and a commitment, because it's not like it's obvious to you how you're going to get the return on all this investment you're making upfront. Like somebody has to say, I know this is going to be needed, and you make that investment. So when did that happen at MaryRuth, or was it always the case and the DNA was one of deep measurement? Like walk me through how you got to this point from an analytics standpoint.
Yeah, so we're probably about 3 years in on like our sort of analytics, journey, I would say, and it's definitely evolved over time. I mean, I think I learned this very early on from like one of the first employees that ever joined Anchor before they became, a huge brand, and then he went on to also work in Vital Proteins. But like for him, he always said like his greatest strategy or greatest strength is like he was just trying to improve every part of the business, but just by 1% every day. And like the compounding interest from that made him invincible, right? He didn't have to take a lot of big bets. He just had to optimize the things that were working or not working just by a little bit. And that was like, those bite-sized chunks were like very easy to digest and very easy to work on. And he said that was always powered just by having the data and understanding what is a 1% improvement, right? So for me, like I've thought about that for like the last 10 years, I think. I forget how long ago I spoke to him. But for us, I mean, we just started, and we started simply, right? Like even before we partnered with Intentwise, we would collect a lot of our business report data from Amazon manually every day. Someone would wake up in the morning, download the report for the last 30 days and re-upload it for us, right? And we just built our Tableau dashboard based off Google Sheets for a very long time. Even today, for some things where I just can't find a data connection, we still collect the data manually, right? So I think just having the data at your fingertips, just again, it allows you to see so much and optimize so much so quickly, right? Like I think some of the basic use cases really will help a lot of people, right? Like piping in your sales and your discounts and your advertising spend and having just like maybe a mini operational P&L, I call it, right? Right away, most people should see the impact of that. Okay, great. We were very profitable yesterday. Let's keep going. Or we were not so much. We need to figure out discounts and marketing spend, right? That's like an easy, you could use it in the first day. I think another one that pains a lot of businesses is like, what's the status of inventory, especially across channels, right? Where do you have inventory? How much do you have at FBA? How much do you need to send to FBA? What kind of days of cover is that, right? This is all stuff that can be done in sort of this data visualization that makes it very easy. And I think like those are the two first use cases. You should be able to sell this to any board on like why it's needed. I do think it's just becoming more mainstream though. I do think businesses are catching on more. A lot of people hit me up on like, hey, Jay, can we get some inside peek at the Tableau dashboards because we're building something similar. Right. And that can happen in Power BI or any data visualization tool. But I think a lot more people understand it now, and it's becoming a little bit more popular.
I have to ask this question because a lot of our listeners are Amazon focused,
Yeah.
obviously. What are the top 3 to 5 metrics you're paying attention to every morning when it comes to the Amazon channel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly the ones I said, right? But I think there's 4, and again, I've said them so they'll be a bit obvious. But it's gross sales, it's discounts, which will ultimately lead to net sales, it's marketing spend, and it's contribution margin, both in dollars and percentage, right? And like that's what I care about the most. I do think using like a service like Intentwise, you can get a little bit more sophisticated, and you can understand like new customers, right? It's not possible to understand who the customer is, but you can easily understand based on that unique email, like have they purchased before. And so like new customer acquisition, I think is one we care about more these days. But those four, gross sales, discounts, marketing spend, contribution margin, like you
Yeah.
can grow your business infinitely just staring at those, right? So
Great feedback. Role of AI, you're collecting all this data from a brand perspective. Like, what is your take on where AI is going and how it'll impact you, positive or negative?
yeah, no, I mean, I think we're using AI a lot, and I think I'm leaning heavily on the team to use AI. I was just at a CEO dinner maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago with a bunch of large brands, and like every single one of them, like the bar for using AI at businesses, I think is greatly increasing. For us, we're actually not using it so much, I would say, on our day-to-day like analytics review. I think that's the part where like I feel like I have a little bit of the magic sauce, so I like to look at it myself. But I will say like we're using it to power, content iteration and creative iteration, like how we write hooks or scripts or what scenes we do or how we script write. That's all mostly powered by AI today, with an additional human component. And then I think one of the biggest things it's helping us with that is a little data involved is like demand forecasting, right? Understanding seasonality and how the demand of products will shift over time. And that's one, especially as you get bigger, you got to get right because, supply chain can only order what you're asking for. You really want to make sure those are the right things. And then I think, content testing, maybe even a little bit of like ad buying and how that works today. I do think that's something that's becoming more AI automated and things like that. It's heavy for us in the creative side of the business for sure, and then heavy on the demand side, demand
Gotcha.
forecasting side.
Anything you have learned from your experience that brand managers should not do?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I think one, don't reinvent the wheel, right? I think like one of the things we've done really well at is just like a little bit of networking, right? Like I think most brands and brand CEOs or managers or whoever like very willing to share like what's working, what's not working, and just the value you get from avoiding wasting money on a strategy that some other guy can tell you it just didn't work already is just so invaluable, right? So like I definitely always recommend to a lot of people don't reinvent the wheel and learn from your peers, even learn from your partners, right? Like I think if someone's going to use Intentwise or another service, they can easily ask you, hey, how are people using this data today? And you guys have a bunch of use cases, right? So if someone doesn't know where to start, a lot of the software partners or just general partners are very open to be like, hey, this is what's working, you know?
Yeah.
I think, so that I think that goes for brands and peers. I think one thing I would recommend you do is just make sure you build your machine, in your process before you pour gas on it, right? Like it just takes one cog in the wheel to break to really make
Yeah.
a test or a strategy fall apart. So you want to make sure you build a little bit of a foundation on like, okay, this is what we're going to test. This is what winning looks like. This is what losing looks like. And how do we get there? I always recommend you just want to build the machine first. So
I heard you mention a couple of topics, discounts and then supply chain. One quick question on the supply chain aspect. Have tariffs impacted your business? And if so, like what actions have you taken in response?
no, so I think we've been very blessed. All our manufacturing today is in the U.S. or most of it, and so tariffs have not really impacted us. Maybe a little bit on the raw ingredient side, but I think we just have great co-manufacturer partnerships, and most of them haven't had to take a price increase on the product. So we've actually, I know it's been challenging for many businesses. We've used that a little bit as a competitive advantage where we can still stay aggressive on pricing or promotions, even while tariffs have impacted, other brands in our vertical. So.
Got you. Got you. That's great. Because it is a bit of a mess for a number of them to,
For sure,
try-
for
to
sure.
try and sort through. On the discounts piece, one of the things I've found is that like the discount budget relative to ad budgets is fairly sizable for a lot of brands, but often I don't see the connection being made between discounts versus ad spend versus overall growth in top line as well as margins. How do you think about discounts? And from a measurement perspective, do you have it dialed in where you connect these 3 to 4 pieces and use it as a growth lever?
For any brand, you don't want to over discount and sort of erode the value of your brand, right? Even if you're like a, more affordable, accessible brand or you're a more premium brand, right? Like you want to make sure you're discounting strategically. I think that's like just general for brand building. That's highly important. But I think we always look at both marketing and discounts as the two levers to move sales. I think for marketing spend, it's a little bit more nuanced. It has some of the art right in the ad spend section. For discounts, I think it's very data driven, very scientific, right? You should know when you do like what is the best type of deal to run on Amazon for your product. You should know that, right? And you should A/B test that to death until you do. You should know, is that going to be a 20% strike through price? Is that going to be a 15% off coupon? Is it better for you to run a 15% off coupon all the time, or should it be subscribe and save depending on your category, right? Like I do think it's very important, and that's something we spent a lot of time on and we still do every day. But it's like knowing what does a discount do? Is it going to drive more gross sales but less profit, or is it going to do both? Right? Maybe 20% drives so much more sales, but 10% off discount drives a little bit more sales, but a lot more profit, right? You want to make sure you know which one you're going to do and then which lever you need to use at the time, right? You got a lot of excess inventory, you might run that higher 20% discount. But if you're just trying to move profit up, you might run the 10% discount on some of your hero products, right? So I think for discounts, it's very scientific. You should A/B test it to death until you know exactly what each discount will do for your brand or your product type. And then you should run it when you need it, right? And I think you should only run it when you think you need it, or you're trying to do something strategically, not just have a blanket, discount strategy. So.
Do you tie it to organic rank changes as well, Jay, or do you look at organic rank changes more as a lagging indicator?
I think it's a mix. I mean, I think the name of the game, I think this has been lost a little bit these days because it's a little bit harder to move than it used to be in the past, where there was just maybe some more gimmicky strategies you could run. But I think the name of the game on Amazon is still organic keyword rank, right? Like to grow your brand, that's still the most important metric of all time. And I think you do that through both things, marketing spend and discounts. I mean, I think it's just it's a little tough to get it 100% precise. But I think for us, we're always looking at, as velocities increase, which I think is the number one driver of organic rank, is that driven by the discounts? And if so, that's sort of one of the components we think about with what discounts do what, right? So you could go again at that 20% aggressive discount, sales go up, velocities go up, organic rank goes up, but maybe at a little bit less profit. You just need to measure that more over time if you can sustain that keyword rank. Afterwards, might actually lead to additional profit. So I think keyword rank is still the name of the game on Amazon. It's still highly important.
I'm going to throw a big, heavy word at you, Jay, and see how you think about this. Incrementality.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot gets said about it. I think true incrementality measurement is not easy. You could try and get close with a few different approaches, I think. But I'm curious, how do you think about it? How do you measure it? Or what are the challenges in doing so? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, we own every incrementality measurement tool that exists on Earth, and we use them all in one form or another. I do think this is the part where thousand roads to Rome. But for me, like I think some brands slow growth by trying to over optimize for incrementality. Right? They're so worried about wasting another dollar on a customer they were gonna get anyway that they ultimately lose maybe a few customers, right? And I do think that's like incredibly hard to measure, right? Like a customer, they see your paid ad, then later their favorite influencer talks about it, then they go search it on Amazon and they click your Amazon ad and they use an influencer code. It's like, what part of the funnel did you need to acquire the customer? To answer to all of them, right? And so like, I do think it's tough because every platform like Meta or Klaviyo is like taking too much credit for the sales they drove, right? Higher than 100% of your sales. So it doesn't make sense. But I do think they're all necessary. So, I mean, I would use, I think Northbeam or Triple are like an affordable tool to use, but like I would look at incrementality and use that to drive like where you're going to invest. But don't overdo it in a way where like you totally cut off some of your marketing that doesn't show the greatest incrementality. Because I do think you need the whole stack, the whole funnel to really make the magic work. So
yeah. Also, the context is so different when you're a fast growing brand. You probably care less about getting perfect incrementality measurement. But if you
for
are
sure.
squeezed and looking for optimization, okay, which dollar to pull back really becomes an important question, but also a tough question to answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think you can use any of these incrementality tools to really understand, like,
Yeah.
again, if you're in a pinch, where should you divest versus invest? Again, you just don't want to overdo it, right? You don't want to see Klaviyo has low incrementality and then do nothing. It's not for that, right? It's primarily for retention and brand building, right? So you just want to make sure you don't stop doing strategies just because they don't show the highest incrementality ever. But I do think like it's very important, especially if you're a little bit tight on budget, that you maximize as much as possible.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Jay. Any parting advice for brand managers thinking about growth?
I would say action wins, So I think main thing I always tell to the team is like, I like things 80% perfect and then we move on it, right? If you always wait till 100%, you don't get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of things, TikTok shops, even the early days of Amazon, right? There's really first movers that are doing very well. So I think, take advice from your peers and partners and just double down on the things that are working. As soon as you see a green light, make sure you hit the gas because that's where all the gains are made.
It's like really an experimentation mindset with openness to feedback from anybody and everybody around you.
Oh, for sure. I think not having any ego
Yeah.
would probably be my next piece of advice, right? Because like it'll seem simple sometimes the advice you get, but once you roll it out or like it starts working, you really think like, it was as simple as they said. So
Yeah, absolutely. So much of it is so contextual. This has been amazing, Jay. Thank you so much for
thank you.
sharing your journey, sharing your perspective on how you drive growth for a brand. Wish you well, and thank you for all your time.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it.